And welcome to another session of our EpiDoc training program, for which you can see a link at the bottom of the screen. And in this session, Gabriel Bodard of the University of London is going to show how to deal with complex lacunae, that is, some difficult cases in encoding gaps, lacunae, unclear letters, and the restored text. So please, Gabby, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to give in this short presentation 3 examples of cases where the encoding of restored text, that is lacunae for which we know what used to sit in that place, and unrestored gaps where we have a lacunae that we haven't been able to restore, either in combination with each other or in combination with other features, don't map as neatly from square brackets in Leiden to a single XML tag in EpiDoc TEI as we used to, there being a one-to-one mapping. So I'm going to give three examples of slightly more complex features and how we deal with those. The first of these examples is where we have a lacuna, part of which we can restore and part of which we do not. For this example, I'm going to take this inscription and the letters that we can see on the stone are transcribed there. The letters that we can restore immediately after that are in square brackets, as you're used to seeing in an epigraphic edition. And as you know, in EpiDoc, we simply replace the square brackets with the TEI element supplied, and we give that element a reason of lost because there are other values of supplied for different kinds of brackets in Leiden, and that's fairly straightforward, right? So far so good, and we can tag the underdot in that line as well. However, if we go back to the edition from which that text is this example is taken, and apologies for not having given a link to that edition. I should have added that to the slides. But what we actually see is that we can restore the rest of the word kataskawas there, but we can't restore the rest of that line. We are pretty clear that that's the word, but the rest of the line is a gap. So we do the same as I showed a moment ago. We take the supplied reason lost around the restored text, and we say that the unrestored text is a gap, and specifically we put a space because there's a word difference, and specifically it's a gap reason lost extent unknown unit character. So some number of characters are lost between here and the end of the line, and the editor has not attempted to restore those characters, and we do exactly the same on the second line. However, I hear you object. When we take supplied reason lost around the characters as there, that gives us in transformation those characters in square brackets, correct? And when we take a gap reason lost, that gives us some dots or dashes or similar in square brackets, correct? So won't this give us in our addition too many square brackets? We don't want those square brackets to appear in the addition. So don't we want to do something like put the gap inside the supplied to show that it's all one? No. Okay, stop. No. What we do want to do is exactly what we said before. The supplied is one XML tag. The gap is a separate XML tag because they are making a semantic statement. They're saying that these characters, as there, were on this stone but have been lost, but we can restore them. And the gap is saying there are letters, there would have been letters on the stone here, but they are lost and we are not going to attempt to restore them. Okay, both of those statements are true, and in combination they are true. To say that there used to be a gap on this stone, but it is lost and we are restoring it, makes no sense, right? So you can't put the gap inside the supplied tag. So what happens instead is that the style sheets that render your edition into something that is human readable, that you want to see on a web page or a PDF or whatever, recognizes that a closing square bracket immediately followed by an opening square bracket is redundant, and therefore it gets rid of them for you. Okay, so you can encode it correctly for the semantics, and the style sheets will do the right thing. Okay, so you don't need to try and figure out a more clever way of encoding it to get the brackets in the right place. The brackets will be in the right place. It'll be fixed for that reason. So that's the first example. The second example I want to give is slightly simpler to handle. This is a case where a restoration or part of a restoration is uncertain. So I'm going to take this example of an inscription, which is from the EOSPE corpus, and it's inscription 1.1 from that corpus volume 1, inscription 1. And I'm specifically going to take these characters here at the end of line 2, which is restored in the following way. So we say dedochthai and then probably te boule for the rest of that line. So fairly straightforwardly, we know that the square brackets are replaced by the supplied element. The question mark in parentheses is also part of the human readable markup used by the Leiden of this edition. So we don't keep that in the EpiDoc. Instead, we replace it with an attribute cert equals low. That's saying we're flagging the certainty on this of this restoration as being a little bit lower than usual. Okay, so it's only probably rather than quite likely to be something like chthai te boule in the restoration. However, what we're probably saying, what the editor is actually saying here, is not that the whole restoration is uncertain. Dedochthai is pretty certain. It's only te boule which is a bit of a guess. So so we actually might want to break that into two separate supplements, where we say supplied around the end of dedochthai is pretty secure, and supplied around te boule has a certainty of low. And this this again, if you think of this about what the semantics it's saying is, it's saying these letters are not on the stone because we have restored them because we believe they were originally on the stone. Okay, and so the fact that there's two separate supplied elements is not making any different statement than if they were a single supplied element, except that some of the other attributes on there are different. So again, in the transformation, we don't want to see a square bracket closing after the secure supplement and reopening before the uncertain supplement. Instead, those square brackets there, we just want to disappear, and that they will do. So it's pretty much the same solution as in the previous example, except it's two supplied elements rather than one supplied and one gap in this case. For my third example, this is something that's a bit more thorny, and people sometimes get a little bit more worried about what's going to happen with this, is where you're restoring a span of text in your edition, epigraphic or papyrological, and other things that you're tagging in that text, say you're tagging names, or you're lemmatizing words, or you're doing some other kind of tagging, interferes with your restoration, such that you would, if you marked it up normally, end up with overlapping elements, which, as we know, is completely illegal in any XML, not only in EpiDoc and TEI, but is not acceptable in XML. So for this, I'm going to take this example from the Inscriptions Roman Cyrenaica. This image is just from a squeeze. I'm looking at the end of the first line there. And to show you what the editor thinks that says, is that line says epikrime gnaiu Corneliu, and in this case we saw the gna at the end of the line, and the rest of the line has been restored. So again, this is fairly straightforward. We can simply say supplied around EU and Corneliu, and I'm not going to put in the reason equals lost in this example because the line is going to get a bit complex. That reason equals lost is required in good XML in here, but just for the ease of visualizing this on the slide, we're omitting it for the moment. Okay, so please imagine that it's there. However, we might, and quite a lot of people do for purposes of indexing, want to tag that GNAU is a name, because we want to be able to index that and also to lemmatize it, as it were, to give it the nominative form GNAIOS. And we want to say that Corneliu is a name, and we want to be able to index that. However, as I suggested before, you can see here there is overlapping elements, and you know that if you started to encode this in Oxygen or any other validating XML editor, you would get this. It would start underlining in red. It wouldn't do the underlining handwritten as mine was, but it would underline with a squiggly line in red, saying a little pop-up saying, you know, the element supplied must be closed with a supplied tag, not with a name tag, right, or something like that. So it's saying that this is not just invalid, this is ill-formed, absolutely unacceptable. So what we have to do in order to do this is we have to close the supplied tag before we can close that name tag. And we can then have the second name tag entirely supplied. We could also put the second supplied inside the second name. It wouldn't make any difference. Whether supplied is inside a name or name is inside a supplied is completely equivalent. One of there are two tags that are doing different things, two elements doing different things. It doesn't matter which one's inside the other, except that if you had maybe 2 or 3 names and a title and something else also supplied at the end of that line, any complete name could just be inside one supplied tag, could have 4 or 5 complete elements inside there, and that would cause no overlapping, so would be fine. So this might well be the neatest way to do it. But as soon as one tag contains both text that is supplied and text that is not, then the supplied tag needs to be inside that element, and it needs to close inside that element as well as opening inside that element, as in this example here. And again, you might worry that is going to lead to a closing square bracket at the end of GNAU and an opening square bracket at the beginning of Corneliu, but that's not going to happen. Those will be you know, the style sheet knows to drop those. So the moral of all 3 of those examples is that what we want to do in EpiDoc is to encode the semantics of what is going on in the text. This character is restored by the editor from a completely lost part of the support. And whether we say that on each individual character or on a long span of characters is purely for convenience. Saying it on each individual character in a word that is not interrupted by anything, you know, with 9 different supplied tags would be kind of annoying, and you know, wouldn't serve any purpose, wouldn't do any harm, but except it would make the text completely unreadable. So encode the semantics of your text, and if that's going to cause a problem with the display, that's a problem for your XSLT developer to fix. That's not something that you should try to work around with some clever way of abusing the XML and making it say things that aren't really true just in order to put the brackets in the right place. Okay. Irene, do you want to add anything?
No, great. Thank you, Gabby.
Okay, thank you.